All right, I think we can start with the roll call.
Okey doke. Member Fassoon is absent currently. Member Hodges?
Here.
Member Larson is also absent. Member Lieberman?
Here.
Member Melgen?
Here.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Here.
Chair Mohammed?
Here. Now on to the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to these indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Now I guess we can move on to the approval of minutes.
Does any member have a comment on the minutes? I'll note that Member Melgen pointed out that there was a wrong date in the header on the minutes, so I'll make sure to fix that before they're posted.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Seconded.
Okay, Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we can move on to public comment. Any members wanting to speak on an item not on the agenda can do so now.
All right, we will go to our first person. You may begin whenever.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. I noticed in the agenda, even though it was requested several times by members of the public, there's no discussion of declaring a climate emergency. I think you need to do this, recommend to the City Council that they put forward a declaration or declaration about climate emergency and the importance of city action being all looked through the lens of climate action. The number one goal in the city's strategic plan is advance climate action and adaptation. So it's our number one goal for the city. And so to do that, we need to establish the urgency with which this needs to be done. And we need to coordinate all segments and departments of the city into taking climate action very seriously and putting it at the top of their priorities. So I encourage you to ask the City Council to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will go to the next public comment. You may begin.
This is Lucinda Young, and I also echo the previous member of the public's comment. Last month, I, as well as a couple of other members of the public, at least one other member of the public, had requested a climate emergency declaration be placed as a new agenda item. I'm disappointed that it's not on the agenda this month, and there have been previous calls for that and even later than last month. So I would urge you to revisit that, and hopefully we'll get that on the calendar for a month, maybe perhaps next month. And I also I just pulled up a copy of Hayward's climate emergency declaration, which I'm happy to email if that would help. I don't see this as requiring a lot of staff time, as there have been so many other cities in the Bay Area that have already done this. So if that is a consideration, staff time, I don't see this as being a big time consumer. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is all for public comment.
All right, we will now go into the next item, which is announcements.
Great. I don't have a ton of announcements today, but one thing I will note is recently East Bay Community Energy went through a name change, and it's now called Ava Community Energy. So this has been published on our e-news and the EBC community or the social media, and will also be noted on upcoming PG&E bills that people get. So we're trying to spread that information so people aren't confused when they see a new title. But yeah, they've got a new name and a new look, and lots of the same good, exciting stuff coming out. So we'll note that, and we'll be referring to them as Ava Community Energy from now on. And then I'll also just reiterate from last month that the TECH program, Technology and Equipment for Clean Heating, has launched rebates for heat pump water heaters. These rebates are pretty significant. They start at $3,100 and have all kinds of adders for lower income households and electrical panel upgrades and lots of things. And this whole program, you can learn more about it at switchison.org and learn about all of the incentives that are available. So, two great programs.
I didn't catch who's offering that rebate?
It's from the TECH program. TECH is the acronym.
Any other questions?
Another comment, maybe? It's been in the news. PG&E has proposed a 22% rate increase. This has nothing to do with Ava Community Energy. This is going to be in the wires charge. Turn has made a counter proposal that would reduce the cost partly by putting in insulated wires rather than putting the distribution wires underground, and that would be an 11% rate increase. And this will affect all of us, whether we're buying our energy from Ava Community Energy or from PG&E. Just a note of news. And I mention it because obviously it hurts the electrification prospects.
If there are no other comments, I think we can move on to public comment.
We're not seeing any hands raised online right now.
Okay, then we can move on to discussion.
I suppose the proper time to talk about that climate emergency declaration would be under the future agenda items later on this evening?
Yeah, that would be the
So
time
we'll
to
put it off
discuss.
till then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, if there are no other comments, then we can move on to the next item.
Great. So I'll give a little spiel first before I hand off to Sutton to give his presentation. So for the last couple of months since Sutton's joined us, we've been doing some research regarding a possible foodware ordinance for foodware that's used in restaurants. We're still in very early stages of this process, and we've just been doing a lot of background research, and are going to be doing a lot more outreach and coming back to the committee multiple times as we sort of work through the development process. But we just wanted to kind of start tonight with giving you an overview of what we've been learning about and working on, and just having a chance to kind of talk through it and get your thoughts and feedback and all of that good stuff. We're not really delving into like specific policy stuff right now, but just kind of looking at it in a broad sense before we really start our outreach efforts. So that's what this presentation is about, and I'll hand it off to Sutton, who has been doing a ton of work on this and can give you all the details.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, we're very excited about a lot of the research that's been done. A ton of cities around Alameda County and all over the Bay have great foodware policies that limit plastic, that limit a lot of these disposables that are obviously contributing to negative emissions. So a lot of this is just background, what's currently being applied in Albany, and then the things that we're considering and what we're going to be looking into when developing this ordinance. The first thing is the need for it in general. It's obviously established in both CAP and the general plan to reduce foodware waste. And then a big part of this as well is getting restaurants, getting businesses ready for larger state bills that are going to have larger impacts on them reducing their waste and reducing their disposable packaging. So that's kind of where we want to get the jump start on. This is kind of some of the evidence we've been looking at. There's studies by Stop Waste. This one is a statewide waste characterization. But yeah, the rigid plastic food serviceware making up 1.3%, which doesn't seem like a lot. What the context of all waste is quite a lot, and actually saw an increase compared to the 2018 characterization. So it's definitely something we want to address in Albany. There's actually another waste characterization going on currently. I'm not sure when the results of that are going to be ready, but that's definitely something we're going to look at when developing this. We're going to briefly move into just the background on all the different types of foodware. Reusables, which is obviously the go-to. It's reusable, made of durable materials. Various case studies in Alameda County created economic savings for businesses that have completely converted to using reusables, even taking into account the dishwashing or buying of more expensive materials over time. The other kind of disposable is just, or the first kind of disposable is landfill disposables. This is a thing that we're basically trying to get rid of entirely, single-use plastic items, a lot of Tupperwares, obviously plastic silverware, and then plastic cups and boxes like that. The next kind of disposable, which is very misleading, and one of the main problems we're having to get over is compostable plastics or PLA-lined materials. So obviously the first one looks like plastic. It's made out of what's called compostable plastic. It's plant or bio-based plastics. But in the context, we'll be talking about this a little bit later, but in the context of Albany and a lot of other organic processing facilities, they can't actually break down or compost this. It needs higher standards. So it's very misleading because residents are often told to compost it. And even the one in the middle, which looks, you're told it's 100% compostable, most of them have linings to deal with either hot liquid or some kind of substance in there. So that's one of the things we've been looking at. And yeah, like I was mentioning, it's stricter composting requirements. It has to be done in an industrial facility with higher temperatures, which isn't feasible in Albany, and a couple other places around the county have the same problem. And the other issue is it has to be taken out of the regular recycling contamination. And so it's causing a lot more sorting issues and making it a lot more difficult for the composting facilities. Now we're going to be moving into the more ideal forms of foodware that we've been looking at and trying to explore solutions. Fiber-based compostables are natural packing materials. It's 100% fiber-based, and that's what we can take in Albany. There's definitely a slightly more limited market availability of these, but that's kind of what they look like in comparison to the compostable plastics. And then looking at some of the local foodware policies that have been done around the Bay, some of the ones that we're going to be considering modeling it off of. Accessories by request is a very common one. This is for disposable single-use items that aren't necessarily needed by customers. It can be straws, it can be plastic silverware. Oakland, Alameda, Livermore have this, that the customer actually has to go up to the counter and request it. It's not given to them. And then reusable dine-in requirements. Both Alameda and Berkeley have this, that if you are just doing dine-in, then you need to have reusable. You can't have disposable foodware. And then we're looking at sustainable takeout requirements. A couple of cities, as you can see, have recyclable or compostable requirements, and then very few actually have fiber-based, Alameda and Marin. So we've been talking with all these cities, understanding their challenges, and trying to get a gauge on what will work for Albany. This is a great example. We just talked with the County of Marin. This is just a graphic, an example of combining different policies and different foodware requirements in order to create something that's feasible for restaurants and at the end of the day moves the needle. So in this case, it's reusables is best, compostable or aluminum is okay / required, and then plastic and plastic lined paper are banned. And so you can see here they're incorporating a variety of different policy mechanisms, and then there's a disincentive with a 25-cent charge for disposable cups. As I mentioned before, these are kind of the different routes that we're considering on how to enforce this, positive or negative incentives. Great to incorporate some type of positive incentive for customers who are bringing in their reusable cup or containers or giving that to the restaurant. A fee for the restaurants that actually wouldn't be charged them. We charge the customer for requesting a non-essential single-use accessory item. Requirements or bans. Mentioned this before, but if we can get rid of all of the compostable plastics and single-use disposable plastics, that is the end goal. And then we want to work with other programs and organizations to keep pushing reusables. Rethink Disposable is a great program that's worked in Alameda County. It partners with restaurants. It gives a $500 stipend to help them make that transition to being fully reusable, and it offers much technical assistance as well. So I think a big part of creating this ordinance and talking with these restaurants is not just the outreach and figuring out what works for them, but providing them with all these resources and all this research that we've done to make it easier. And then lastly, this is the things that we're taking into account. We don't have all the answers. It's definitely going to be kind of like a difficult mountain to climb. The cost and market availability of the fully eco products may not be all there yet. The functionality of like using only fiber-based can be difficult. Marin, for example, has a product exemption list where they have, I think it's 8 or 9 at the moment, but it's annually updated products that aren't currently available. So they're allowing that while also having a fiber-based ordinance. Taking equity into account, a grant program to support reusable transition is what we've seen, and then just technical and educational resources. And then lastly, the overall environmental impact. Definitely want to work with REMAC to ensure that whatever policy we're going to put in place, whatever we're enforcing actually on the restaurants is actually going to make composting easier and reduce landfill at the end of the day. And then next steps, we're kind of at the end of our outreach to other cities and analyzing other ordinances. Now we're going to start working with restaurants to understand what might be difficult for them, and then provide some initial resources and data that we've been looking at, and then further developing the policy. We're going to try and find some studies into seeing what mechanisms are most effective, whether it's positive or negative incentive, and seeing that it doesn't have too negative an effect on the business or the restaurant as well. So yeah, that is about it. These are kind of some leading questions that we have for you guys, some feedback we'd love to hear. What are like some things in mind that you want to prioritize when we're developing this? As we touched on before, what areas do you think we need to be focusing on in terms of whether it's incentive options, takeout, reusables? What do you think, I guess, we should be spending most of our research or time on? Thoughts or suggestions on our considerations, whether that's equity, feasibility, the overall impact, if you had any insights there. And then lastly, suggestions for outreach and development of the policy. So when we're talking to businesses, if you have any feedback on how we should go about that, that would be great. Thank you guys for your time.
And I know it's always confusing when we end slides with questions for you. So I'll just remind us that this is the part now where you ask us questions, and then we have public comment, and then you answer our questions.
question about the compostable plastics. I have heard that they're not really very compostable. My understanding was that they are, circumstantially compostable. So in the slides you mentioned that they cannot be composted in Albany. But we don't do any composting in Albany, do we?
So by in Albany, we mean through the Albany Waste Service. So Waste Management, who does the hauling here, they can't compost the compostable plastics.
And then I had a question about your restaurant outreach. Do you have like a list and you call all the restaurants, or is there, I don't know if you've done that before, as, with the waste sorting and that sort of outreach.
We do have a list of the restaurants, and then there's also, like the Chamber of Commerce and the Solano Avenue Association. We're working closely with our economic development staff member who has more of a relationship with those businesses. So we're going to be doing a few different routes to get in touch.
I actually had a question about paper straws. Like, would they be the paper with the lining, or are they also compostable?
So, yeah, I think generally the ones that kind of dissolve, that's the actual fiber-based stuff, and then there are other ones that have a plastic or compostable plastic lining, and those wouldn't be compostable here in Albany. Yeah.
I have a few questions. I don't know if you want to go ahead. Okay. Do we have any current policy around this?
Yeah, the only policy we have at the moment is a ban on styrofoam for takeout options, and then, yeah, I believe that is all we have at the moment.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and then a plastic bag
Okay,
charge.
yeah.
That's mostly applied to groceries, but yeah.
Okay. And then, do you know if our composting service that's provided by Waste Management, do you know if it is consistent with our neighboring cities' like, you were saying that we can't, our service won't be able to compost those items. Is that, I'm just trying to think about consistency because we're so close to these other cities.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. Berkeley does take compostable plastics in their compost, although I think there's a question in the how effective is that actually, how much of it is actually composted? And I know there's some variety from jurisdiction to jurisdiction around the county and around the region. What I've generally heard is that in the cases where they do accept compostable plastics, most of the time they're not actually being composted. So yeah, by and large, most people are trying to move away from compostable plastics as an option, at least right now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not super
that helps.
consistent.
That helps. And then, I mean, it seems like we should align those. Yeah. And then I recall when I read the staff report online, I recall something about Stop Waste having a model policy or something. Is that available, or are they working on it now? I wasn't quite clear from reading that.
Yeah, they've completed it, and we're using it sort of as a base foundation for our work here. It's a model that has a bunch of different options in it. It's kind of a choose your own adventure ordinance.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I had one question related to consumer education. You mentioned how it can often be just complicated to get people to know what to do. I certainly run into existential questions every time I put something to the bin or the recycling. So I was just curious, to date, how has consumer education on recycling been done? Has that mostly been led by Waste Management, or is there any kind of city programs around that? And would that be part of this rollout of this ordinance too?
Yeah, that's a great question. To date, we partnered with Waste Management on consumer education, so it's a lot of city staff and Waste Management staff working together. on things like, social media and mailers and events and, stickers on bins and a whole array of things. So yeah, there's been a lot of different kinds of work on that, although there's definitely still work to be done. It's very confusing and kind of constantly changing, and it's different when you walk from one side of Solano to the other, so there's a lot of challenges there. Yeah, I think in terms of how that would be related to this ordinance, hopefully Sutton and I were talking about how, there's definitely a goal of like making it easy on the customer, knowing what to do with the different items they're given. So I think that's definitely a goal. And there'll definitely, in addition to the outreach to the businesses, once we get a little farther along and have an ordinance, then there'll have to be outreach to the public too. And hopefully that can help with sorting. Do you have other thoughts on that, Sutton?
Yeah, I was just going to say, also, I feel like as part of our outreach to the businesses and giving them this background, these educational resources, we want to be able to provide them with stuff that they can give to their customers and labels and stuff like that to make it easier on them. Obviously, we don't want to tell them what to do exactly right now while we're still in the phases of figuring out this ordinance. But yeah, I think that was my insight on it.
I had a question about, so would you, push this policy in schools as well in Albany?
So we don't have jurisdiction over the schools, so we couldn't require anything about their foodware. Although I will say that Stop Waste has been working with the schools to try to put more reusables in there, and there's been some progress on that. So we're kind of like supporting that in the small ways we can. And there has been some discussion about ways that we might be able to kind of work with the schools that get a lot of students coming, and maybe there's like some sort of reusable program that can happen that kind of works with the high school or something. So there's been talk about a connection there, but we can't actually require anything of the school's foodware.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on really fast to that. The other thing that we want to do with our outreach is restaurants that are already meeting these compliance or eager to support the reusable development. We definitely want to start pushing pilot programs with them. Obviously not sure if we have jurisdiction with the school, but we do have a couple of restaurants in mind in Albany that are open to the reusable pilot program, and so we could hopefully use them as this model to show other businesses, hey, this is working, they do this, it's still attractive to customers. So yeah.
Any other questions?
All right, if there are no other questions, we can move on to public comment.
All right, first person, you may begin when you're ready.
Yeah, hi, Nick Peterson. Thank you again. This was an excellent report, and I'm really glad to see the city addressing this strongly. It's come up a lot in the past. And I thank our new Civic Spark Fellow for doing an excellent job. Thank you so much. So I think, speaking as a member of Albany Climate Action Coalition, I really applaud that and feel we should move on as quickly as possible and maybe try to get our civic input as part of the process of bringing this to bear and not overanalyze it, because I think it's been implemented in other cities very well. Myself, I feel the Marin model is where we want to end up, or as close to it as possible. One thing I know is when you tell people they're going to have to change, they always resist that, and they always worry about the expense, and it's always a problem. So I really like the idea of having some sort of financial assistance, maybe that would come from Measure DD funds, which we know we have still quite a bit left and more coming in, to help out the impacted businesses put forward the right materials. And then another thought I had was there should be a big celebration of this rather than just passing something and waiting for it to evolve. And I remember the Dinner with Albany events. If we have one in 24, wouldn't it be cool that the whole thing would be done entirely with sustainably handled foodware? You know, that there wouldn't be any plastic at all, and that everyone would come and celebrate that and actually know our city does this. So I think putting an event in like that could be, one, very beneficial for the businesses and the customers, and two, would be a goal to shoot for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next public comment now. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Rainey. I'm the owner. I'm an Albany resident, and I also have a zero waste store on Solano Avenue called Feel Good. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for studying this issue. Obviously, I fully support your efforts. I wanted to give you some feedback because I used to partner with Dispatch Goods. If you know about that company, they used to work with restaurants. They provided reusable foodware that customers would get with their takeout orders. And then customers would use them and then be able to return them to the restaurants or to a drop-off location. I was one of them. And I want to say, if restaurants are listening right now, that the feedbacks were excellent, that people are looking for these solutions. They are tired of all the single-use plastics waste. And it was an easy way to avoid all this waste. I also want to mention, so Dispatch doesn't do that anymore. There's another service located in Berkeley. It's called To Go Where. They do exactly the same. They provide restaurants with reusable containers for takeout orders, and then they collect them, clean them, and return them to the restaurants. They already have restaurants partners in Berkeley. Maybe some businesses in Albany would like to try. That would be really great. And then finally, I have one comment on everything compostable. Please include something about PFAS, because I recently learned that a lot of paper straws now have PFAS on them, which is a serious health issues. So maybe you can add this as a criteria when choosing compostable foodware. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next public comment. You may begin.
Hello, this is Lucinda Young, and I'm very happy to see this on the agenda at tonight's meeting. I had requested this several times over the last year. I know many of our neighboring cities have ordinances to address this, and I think there's a big need for it. I do cleanup in Albany, both at Albany Bulb about once a month, and also Memorial Park and Solano Avenue. And the major source of litter is the single-use plastic. You know, there is paper also, but the paper is going to biodegrade. It's going to be gone in, a month or a couple months. Whereas the plastic is not going away. It is going to persist unless somebody like me happens to pick it up. But it's going to continue to disrupt our ecosystem. It's a huge environmental problem. So I'm glad to see this discussion. I have a couple comments. I would like to see a focus on reusables. If obviously compostable plastic is better than conventional plastic, even though Waste Management cannot compost the compostable plastics. But compostable plastic still uses resources. It's still, at least with with Waste Management's current arrangement, it still has to be landfilled. It's going to end up in the same place. So I think reusables is superior and would like to see us move in that direction. And I also wanted to mention that, the fast food restaurant Taco Bell is really a model. They have almost no plastic foodware. They're not reusables, but they are all either paper or fiber based. So it's always encouraging to see that. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is all for public comment.
All right, now on to discussion.
We'll go ahead and put our discussion questions back up there for reference. No need to necessarily stick to these, but we thought it would be a kind of helpful guide to guide our discussion about it.
Before we do that, is there a staff recommendation? I've forgotten, or is this just a discussion item?
No, this is just a presentation and
Okay.
discussion item, yeah.
I mean, I'd be interested in seeing the stop waste. I guess I'd be interested in seeing also what Marin, sort of the specifics of some of the other ones that you present. I don't know if that's something that you can share a set of links, or I know I could probably look it up on my own, but the presentation was excellent. This isn't a reflection on, there was plenty of info in there. I just feel like now it's okay, I need the next step to dig a little deeper and sort of better understand those other options.
Would it be possible to send a presentation to the CAC members? I didn't see it on the agenda. I saw the report, which is excellent, but not the slides.
Yeah, we can send it out. We also usually upload them after the fact. We just finish the presentations a little bit later on in the week.
I like the idea that prioritizing reusable stuff over paper or anything, because paper is kind of inefficient. Sometimes it dissolves in your drink or whatever. So I think reusable would be more effective.
I think it's great that you all have already, done the research on what other cities in the Bay are doing, and that we have that to build on. So thank you. And yeah, I concur that more reusables would be great. I concur with the commenter that the Marin or Alameda model of going fiber-based is clearly the way to go, particularly because they have exceptions, So for those, if the technology's not there yet, then you have an exception. So it seems like that's kind of an easy win. But yeah, this looks great, and looking forward to the next round of development.
Do we know what the ramp-up period was for the cities that adopted the ordinance? Did they adopt it and say this goes into effect in 2 years or something like that? Because I was just listening to the comment about let's do this quickly, and I think yes, but I know it also takes, this is an item that they'll need to, they probably have an existing inventory of plastic items, and they, need to find a provider for new items.
Yeah, great question. So some of these ordinances were passed right before COVID.
Okay.
Like in Berkeley, for example. So they're kind of getting into enforcement now, basically. So there's been kind of a weird gap with a few of them. But even the ones that were passed after COVID generally have kind of a multi-year ramp-up period where they start out with more of the outreach, engagement, moving on to technical assistance, and pretty much the ones we've been talking to are just starting enforcement and haven't really gotten into the actual enforcement piece of it yet. So there are quite a few out there, but they're still in relatively early stages and slower going. But also, really trying to focus on helping restaurants comply rather than punishing people. So in that sense, they started early in the helping phase, and they're only now getting into the sort of the enforcement phase of it. So.
Yeah, just for some context, Marin just started their enforcement, I think, this November 10th. They had an 18-month adoption period post actually passing the ordinance. And then in that time, they had a technical team that reached out to businesses and restaurants and was working with them, as well as pushing, like what we mentioned before, grant programs. So if it was a lower income restaurant, they could apply. It would be a $500 stipend that would help them make that transition in the meantime. Yeah.
In other instances of working with local restaurants on things like sorting recyclables or the plastic bag fee, has there been much pushback?
I don't know exactly, since I haven't been around that long. I think generally what I've heard is that, people kind of stick to the status quo, and it can be tricky to shift them to do something different. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of kind of personal experience with it, so I can't speak to it too much, unfortunately. Any other thoughts or questions? There'll be lots of other chances, so no worries if you have more questions later on. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a question that goes at future agenda items, but like, what would our cadence be for like having something to vote on?
Yeah, great question.
What does it take to get from here to there?
Yeah, we don't have a specific timeline, but yeah, we're planning tomorrow to talk with our economic development people and start talking about what the outreach plan is. And I think we're kind of roughly planning to, we'll do some work on this for a couple months, build up something to bring it back to you guys, and kind of do it in phases like that. And hopefully have sort of an ordinance put together sooner than later. You never know how long these things take, I suppose, but, I'm kind of hoping sometime in, maybe like early, middle of next year, we'll have an ordinance drafted and maybe to vote on, but I don't want to make any promises, It depends on, what kind of issues we bump into, but.
All right, if there are no other comments or anything, I think we can move on to the next item.
Okay, this one is me. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So this is the advisory body status update report. So I don't have a presentation, but I'm just going to provide some context for this. So previously, committees had been creating work plans and then getting those approved by the council. And those were fairly detailed and had kind of specific lists of everything the committee had worked on and everything they were going to work on. And it was fairly formal, and it ended up taking a lot of time away from actually doing the work and became kind of clunky. So the council has changed that model now to the status update report, which is what you see here. This is a much more trimmed down version, and it's really meant to be more of a check-in rather than sort of like a whole plan. So as you can see here, we have the purpose of the committee up top, which is just the language that was used when the committee was created. Summary of the meeting attendance, and then the items worked on during this year and prospective upcoming work items. These lists are just something that I put together based on, looking back through our committee agendas and knowing what the priorities are. They're not meant to be all-inclusive. There are some things we worked on that were fairly small and didn't make the list, or that are kind of lumped together into one bullet point, and it's kind of a few different items. And then with the prospective upcoming work items, these are things, we were told to keep it to 3 or 4 bullet points, and it doesn't have to be exhaustive. So again, I was trying to keep it fairly general, focusing on, some of the things we know we're working on and the general priorities of the committee. Just because it's not on there doesn't mean we can't do it next year. So it's not like we have to put everything on there that we're thinking of, or if something comes up. It's just really meant to be a check-in on basically what the committee is doing in a kind of overarching sense. So that's what this is, and then you can see the goals after the end of each of those items. That's the connection to the council strategic plan. So there's 5 major goals in the plan, and it's just connecting each of our bullet points to one or more of those goals. So that's what we're looking at here. The council is going to look at these in January. And so the committee has to approve this. You guys can make changes as you see fit, but ideally we'll keep it pretty close to this and be able to approve it for the council to look at in their January meeting. So hopefully that all made enough sense. Happy to answer any questions about it.
Just a small question. When I look at the prospective work, I see a couple of items, that were mentioned in items worked on that are in progress, right? So they're in progress, ergo we're going to do them in the future, and they're in the bottom section. One of the things that's in the city strategic plan in their goal 1 is the street tree management, which is indicated as in progress in the middle, and so does it also belong in the bottom section? Because we're going to keep working on it.
Yeah, we could put that in there. I didn't put it in there just because it's the main committee that's working on that is the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission. So I thought it would make more sense to leave it off of our list since it's so short, since it's kind of like one of the major items for that committee. But if you guys wanted to put it on here, we could put it into the perspective, since we are planning to bring it back to this committee later on.
What is the sort of rhythm of that? Like they'll work on it in Parks and Rec, and as the plan is completed, which it's currently in progress, and then will it come back to us once they've kind of, for example, if there's alternatives offered in the plan, they'll look at it, provide their recommendations, and that's about the time it'll come back here?
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't planned it out in a bunch of detail, but I think generally once there's sort of a rough draft type version of the plan, or maybe something like a basic list of items that we're thinking about having in there or something, at that point we'll probably bring it back to this committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm also wondering if, for the sake of, I imagine all of the thousands of people of Albany reading this, but for those who are and who aren't here in this room, I wonder if it's possible to link the completed items back to the CAP goals as well.
Yeah, just to let you know, this is based off of a template we were given that had specific instructions.
Okay.
But we could do that kind of as a separate document potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. Are there any other, so the goal 1 in the city strategic plan is basically all the climate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I see that the EV stuff is also baked into goal 3, which I imagine is a transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else in their goal 3 about transportation as touches on climate and sustainability?
Yes, the transportation goal, I forget the exact wording, but it's basically sustainable and safe transportation. So to the, most of the transportation related work we've done on this committee is related to electric vehicles. That's not to say that there isn't any work to be done related to active transit and other things, but just based on the kinds of items that come up, usually they're like technical things about bike lanes that go to the transportation committee rather than us. So yeah, there's some overlap there, but you can see I put in the wording, I wrote EV infrastructure and incentivizing active transit, just because I figured there's probably going to be a few things that come up in that realm, and they kind of interact. So yeah, and then there's sort of the other half of that transit goal 3, which is more about safety, and that really does get more into the Transportation Commission stop sign kind of stuff.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of incentivizing active transit, would it also be fair to say we want to incentivize use of public transit? I mean,
Yeah, we could definitely put that in there.
thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, if there are no other questions, we can move on to public comment.
We're going to move on to public comment now. First person, you may begin when you're ready.
Hi, thank you. Nick Peterson here from Albany Climate Action Coalition. One thing I wanted to mention is when you guys put me up, I can't see the timer, so if you could give me a 20-second and then a 10-second, that'd be nice. So this is great. I think the work plans were really good. They made us think a lot about what we were to do. I think putting this together, which is more an update, and then where you're moving forward on your goals. I get worried about, that everyone knows the goals and what we're trying to accomplish in the next 2 years. Next 2 years are very critical. So I get a little nervous when words like consider or, work out or develop are used. That just looks like a lot of time going by. And as we just heard from Michelle, these things take a year. They go to this committee, they kick it around, it goes back to the other, and it goes to this. And I think this really speaks to a lack of urgency and a sort of business as usual approach when things that are related to climate action response and the climate action adaptation plan should be more expedited. And I really encourage declaring a climate emergency and moving forward on that. A couple of things on that have been completed. And again, I think I was noticing, and I'll apologize if I can't quite, I can't see it because it went away. But anyway, the multifamily EV pilot project, yeah, it's great. We did a pilot project, but what's been completed on trying to get EV chargers in all multifamily, and especially the naturally occurring affordable multifamily housing, and where is that even there, and who owns it, and are we doing it? And it says it's proceeding, but at what rate? Are we going to do enough? Are we going to develop something more and larger into something that will help all multifamily in Albany? I mean, there's a lot of work and a lot of development of that to do before it meets the cap goal. And it needs to be monitored. So it'd be nice to know how many buildings we did. I think it was 3. We need to know how many chargers went in. I think it was a couple or 4 each or something. But that information needs to be documented against where the goal is. And that's where I think more effort and staff time is needed to really do that correctly. So I think once we get the urgency up, rather than just plodding along, realize we have less than 10 years to really do significant stuff in place, probably more like 5 years. And we're talking about taking a whole year just to maybe get something forward to get people to look at it, and then maybe some more time. Just like spending the DD funds is going to be, mulled over for 6 months, then put into this, and then in maybe a year from now, we'll start proposing some things and start spending that money.
10 seconds.
2 years down the road with the results. So let's get the urgency, guys. I love the plan, but it needs more urgency. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And thank you for letting us know about the clock issue. We'll speak with our tech team about that.
I believe that is all for public comment at the moment.
go ahead and put this back up for context.
All right, we can move on to discussion of this item. Any comments?
I don't, this is, it's very helpful. I appreciate the format. It's great to have sort of a big, or like a simple overview. And sort of echoing what Nick said, I think understanding a work, like just, it's sort of a reminder about the importance of a work plan and a scope and sort of a outlook for where we're going over the next year, however long, calendar year, fiscal year, whatever we pick, but just, I think that would help our group.
I agree with that. Not sure the extent to which our input is actually being solicited on whether we get to have work plans anymore. But maybe to my fellow committee members, I would say let's keep it front of mind for how can we turn these bullet points into like, this is what we really want to get done next year or so. This is meant to be like an update of the calendar year's work.
Yeah, it's for the calendar year.
So maybe to consider like which particular things falling under these very general bullets do we want to work on in 2024, something to talk about more, discuss more. This is great, and really, I also appreciate the transparency of this document. Like, these are the real things that we did, and I appreciate how many of these things do tie in to the climate action plan. Because that's been really important to me, that the sort of the time and care that went into making that manifests in us taking all those actions, which I know staff is doing. And I want to make sure that we're accountable to that as well. Oh, and I wonder, I don't know, again, with this being a template, simply changing the word consider, because the commenter was concerned about urgency, and certainly I am as well, to enact. I mean, we can't enact policies, but like recommend policies. We will recommend policies. We won't just think about them. We're going to put them out there.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that, like changing the words into like something more action-based.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said here. I mean, yeah, I haven't been part of a work planning session, so I don't know how effective they've been. But I do think some time as a whole committee to discuss what our 2024 goals would be helpful for me, beyond just what we're doing in subcommittees, but just as a whole group. So yeah, I would still like to have that conversation, even if it's not a formal strategic plan. And yeah, it seems like December or start of January would be a good time to reserve some agenda time for that.
Yeah, I'll note, we can bring this back up when it comes to future agenda items, but we could definitely do just kind of like a committee prioritization session that's outside of this status update, and kind of just like falls into the really broad categories here and kind of drill into it a little bit more. So that could be kind of a separate thing, and then for tonight, this can be, you guys can agree on whatever wording changes or whatever else to make to this specific document before approving it for council to view. So yeah, those can be kind of two separate tracks.
Sort of procedurally, like, how does that work on the agenda? Can we like book time to discuss a work plan or whatever we want to call it?
Yeah, we can make it an agenda item to kind of, have a
discussion.
Prioritizing strategy session or whatever we call it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll just note, when it comes to kind of the wording changes, the committee will kind of need to agree on what specific change to make, since we need to like have this completed to send off to council. So if that's a discussion you want to have, it'd be good to kind of like make a determination on it.
How do you guys feel about the verbs develop and recommend policies or programs?
What about urge? Like, I think it's a nice word, but maybe it might be too strong.
Like, so you'd say like urge council to adopt? Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Those two combined, develop and urge council to adopt. I guess we need to develop them first before we can.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's what we're talking about?
Yeah.
And would that be for all three of these items or just the first two?
All three?
Okay.
And then is it possible also to add in the second bullet, incentivize active transit and public transportation? Public transit? Great, thank you.
Okay. So if everyone agrees with the edits and there's no other edits, the action to take would be to, sorry, make sure I have the wording right here. Approve the status update for submission to council. That would be the motion.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Member Fasoon? Member Hodges? Yes. Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
All right, motion passed. Okay.
All right. We can move on to the next item.
Sorry, let me just catch up for a second. Okay. All right. Sorry, one second. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to give a presentation on the heat pump rebate program, updating you on the program and also with a recommendation that you recommend council appropriate some more funding and make a few minor changes. So I'll just start with some background as usual. I think you guys have all heard of this program before, but for anyone who hasn't, this is a rebate program run by the city that is designed to incentivize the installation of heat pump HVAC systems, which are all electric, as part of our CAP electrification goals. This was created in March of 2022 and originally given a $40,000 budget. This is from our Measure DD funds, that are general funds, obviously we said, but it's a sort of Measure DD reserve. And launched in June of 2022. And then back in February of this year, council appropriated an additional, sorry, I realized I had that wrong, $65,000 in funding, not $60,000, that's a typo. An additional $65,000 in funding and also a shift in the rebate amounts that created a new category for moderate income households and changed the numbers around a little bit. So these are the rebate amounts that we have currently. So there's a standard rebate, which anyone is eligible for regardless of income. And then there's also a moderate income and low income rebate level. And then there's different amounts for ducted heat pumps and ductless heat pumps. Ductless heat pumps are quite a bit cheaper, so that's the reasoning there. And then there's also a bonus for electrical panel upgrades. These are only as part of a heat pump project, so if you get it with your heat pump or just 6 months prior to the heat pump, but it's not offered as a standalone rebate. And the eligibility is fairly broad. All buildings in Albany are eligible to get one rebate per housing unit. Any contractor can be used. There's no specific contractor requirement. And people just have to apply for the rebate within 4 months of receiving their building permit. So fairly simple program. And it's been really effective so far. We've had lots of rebates provided. 63 as of today have been reserved or paid. We reserve the rebates for 3 months while people get the project done so that they can know that they have the money coming. So that's why we have some in the reserved fund right now. But you can see, so most of the money has either been paid or reserved at this point. There's $17,750 remaining as of today, out of that $105,000 total appropriations. And I'll also note that of those 63 rebates, 2 were, so since we kind of rejiggered the whole thing and changed all the amounts, 2 of those were to the low-income households and 4 were to moderate-income households. We also had 2 low-income households from the previous iteration of the program. So, so not a huge take-up, but some. Our average rebate amount is $1,385, and it's ranged from $500 to $5,000. That $5,000 would be for a low-income household with an electrical panel upgrade. So we did have, I think, 1 or 2 of those. So that's how it's been going so far. And then this is about the program impact. So it is difficult to really determine exactly what impact the program has had because we don't really have like a comparison to look at. But we can say that the number of heat pumps being installed in the city has continued to rise pretty dramatically over the last several months. So this chart on the left here shows in 6-month increments the percentage that heat pumps were of HVAC permits. So, you know, we looked at all of our HVAC permits, and as, you know, the first half of this year, it made up 60%. 60% of them were heat pump. Sorry, I'm talking way too much tonight. 60% of those HVAC permits were heat pumps over the first half of this year. As you can see, the second half of this year is looking like it's going towards 70, although those numbers aren't complete yet since we're still in November, but it looks like it continues to move up. The little star in the middle there is when the program launched. So yeah, it's hard to say because we have this really stark rise before the program and then it flattens a little bit and then kind of goes up again. But also, you might actually expect it to go down a little bit as the numbers get really high when you start to get into like 50 and 60%, but maybe not. So it's a little bit difficult to say. We have heard some, you know, I saw an article recently saying that nationally heat pump sales have started to drop in the last 6 months, so maybe we're doing comparatively well. What I can say is that the raw numbers have been rising. The raw numbers are on the chart on the right side here. So the blue bars are numbers of furnaces installed, and then the orange ones are the numbers of heat pumps. And you can see, I mean, it's been pretty dramatic. Again, that last column is the second half of this year that isn't finished yet. But we're definitely seeing consistent increases, which is, always great news. And then the other piece of data that we have is just the answer to this question: would you have installed a heat pump without the program? Most of the people that fill out our application have answered this, and the majority said probably, and then there's kind of a half and half saying definitely and maybe. So basically what we're getting is a lot of people that are on the fence, sort of leaning towards a heat pump, but not all the way there. And that's sort of what we would expect this program to have an impact on, is because, we're talking about a $1,000 rebate. It's not a huge amount in the scheme of a heat pump purchase, but it seems like it's enough to get a lot of people kind of over that edge and to push them just a bit. So those are kind of the main reasons that we do think it's been impactful. We know it's not, changing the entire scope of the heat pump economy here, but we do think that it's made a difference. And we've, like I said, seen really impressive numbers. I was telling some colleagues in other cities recently about some of the numbers of the percentage of heat pumps, and they were kind of shocked. So that's always good to hear. So that's generally how the program has been working. And we're starting to get now to the point that we want to think about adding more funding to the program. Like I said before, there's almost $18,000 left. So it's not running super low yet, but we want to start thinking about adding to it before it starts getting really low, because it creates more security in the program and also just logistically easier with holidays coming up. So we were thinking about kind of what amounts made sense, and a big part of that equation is these two sets of numbers here. So on the left, we have the average costs. So for a furnace, the average cost that we saw in our permit data was about $8,000, and for a heat pump, the average is $17,000, which leaves an incremental cost of $9,000. So, a fairly big chunk of money. There are other programs that are helping bring down that incremental cost in addition to Albany's. So the tech program recently launched. I was talking about the heat pump water heaters earlier today, but they have a heat pump HVAC program as well that offers $1,000. You can get up to two rebates for your home if you get 2 heat pump units also. There's a bay rent rebate for $400. Unfortunately, this one isn't accessible for most Albany homes because you have to either have a ductless heat pump or a ducted heat pump with an existing air conditioner, it just doesn't happen very often, so not as helpful. But then there's also a $2,000 federal tax credit that's now available. And then finally, there's the HERA rebates. This is a program that was created by the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a federal program. It's going to be offering quite a bit of money, up to $8,000 for a heat pump. However, we're not expecting it to launch until sometime in the middle of next year, probably. It's still TBD, but that's what we're expecting. So that's kind of the numerical landscape, which explains the recommendations here. So our first recommendation is to recommend that the council appropriate an additional $55,000 for the program. We're estimating that this is going to last into the summer or fall of 2024, based on the amounts we have left and then this extra. And the idea there is that we'll roughly coordinate with the launch of the HERA program. Because that's such a large amount of money, it's pretty much going to make up for the incremental cost. We think that that's a good time for the city to kind of reevaluate our rebate program, figure out if it's still valuable, if we want to change it, if we want to get rid of it, whatever. So the idea is we kind of push it until there and then think about it again when the funding dries up. And then the other change that we're recommending is to increase the levels for ducted heat pumps for low and moderate income households. So the recommendation is to move them for moderate income from $2,000 to $3,000, and for low income from $3,000 to $4,000. The idea being that it seems like because we're not getting much uptake from low and moderate income households right now, and because that incremental cost is pretty significant, it seems like the amounts we have just aren't enough. And we would like to have more of an equity focus in the program. So we're hoping that by increasing those by $1,000 each, it will create more of an incentive, especially when it's added on to those other programs, to really make up a good chunk of that incremental cost and make it a feasible alternative for moderate and low income households. So those are our two recommendations. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any more details about the HERA incentives? Like a summary of like for ducted versus ductless, or low income versus moderate, or like, have those details been released?
There's a little bit that's been released specifically about the income levels. So the HERA program, it'll have two levels, one for low income and then one for, they call it moderate income, although their moderate income is a little more expansive than ours. Theirs is 150% of the area median income, whereas ours is 120. So it's going to cover a larger pool of people. For the moderate income people, it'll cover 50% of the cost up to $8,000. And for low income, it'll cover 100% up to $8,000. Based on the price of a heat pump, it's probably going to be about $8,000 for everybody. Yeah. But there's a little difference there. Most of the details about exactly how the program is going to be rolled out are still being figured out right now. So I don't have a lot more than that. There are also there are rebates for other types of things in that too. So there's heat pump water heater rebates, there's panel rebates. I think they've got like an induction stove rebate, a few other things, so.
And the 55,000, and the estimate that it goes, through summer or fall, is that based on your recommended increased incentives?
Yes, yes it is.
And, is it based on sort of like a ballpark guess on how many people might use the increased?
Yeah. So I mean, it's all an estimate, but I tried to kind of look at how many rebates we've given out, what our sort of trend of increased heat pumps is, and then added a bit on, assuming more people will go for the moderate and low income, and that's the number I came to, so.
So the assumption was maybe like, maybe double the number of people?
Yeah, roughly,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I tried to make it a little on the high side too. Yeah. Any other questions?
I thought I saw somewhere in the presentation something about, when I was reading it at home, about permits, that you could guess how many people were installing all types of heating systems. Am I remembering that wrong? I'm remembering that wrong.
Sorry, could you?
I'm recalling something, but I didn't see it in the show this evening, but I saw it in the document earlier that was sort of guesstimating how many non-heat heating systems were going in based on permits. But if that's not ringing a bell, though.
I'm not sure. I mean, I will say, the charts I showed you are of the permits we have. There's definitely heat pumps, there's definitely HVAC systems going in that aren't permitted. Right. We don't know how many. So, there's a grain of salt with the numbers. That's just of the data that we have. Although generally, I think we're getting a good amount of them permitted. So, yeah, maybe that was it.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
One funding question. I know a couple meetings ago we had talked about some of the rigidness of kind of when, or I guess the cycle of when money gets approved over 2 years. So I guess, yeah, how does it work for this? Is this money that's all kind of already been set aside that we can use, or is it just easier to get funds for these because it's an existing program?
Yeah. So you'll have to forgive me because I'm not an expert on all of the stuff. It'd be good to have Jeff here. This would go into the sort of like earmarked as Measure DD column. But usually the way we do it for, especially for amounts that are this small, it can kind of go underneath like our community development department budget. There's kind of enough space to wiggle around with amounts like this that, you know, the council sort of appropriates funding to each department, and there's a lot of stuff that's just sort of like general department use. So in the past, we've done that with this program, and I imagine we'd be able to do that again. And then, you know, that's all coming from the general fund, so we're able to kind of like earmark it as part of the Measure DD. Again, because that's like not a real funding source. So, yeah, I think, again, with amounts that are fairly small on the scheme of the city budget like this, it's easier to work outside of the formal budgeting cycle. But I can look more into that and figure out the details. I'll have to ask Jeff about exactly how budgeting works. Anything else?
If there are no other questions, I think we can move on to public comment.
Right, first person for public comment, you may begin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. Really, this program, I think, is the best thing that the city has put forward so far, and we've done a lot. And I think it has provided incentives, although it does look like it is pretty mild. It's interesting to see that really steep curve before it went in place, but maybe that could be more early adopters and something to do with just remodeling sector coming more up to speed. But one thing I would suggest is that you add that 50% of these funds be used for low and moderate income, that they don't all get sucked up by people who definitely don't really need them, as you can see from the chart that says they would have done it anyway. So it's just free money to them. I know it's harder to get those people to come forward with a project, so some of that money maybe can be spent in outreach and providing service to provide people quotes and help them out. I know there are a lot of elderly people that own homes. They're probably in that low income category. So I encourage you to try to get some of those parameters done, because those are the people that are going to be very hard to bring to electrification. If we can do it this way, that's fine. I mean, the people with good financial resources are eventually going to do it anyway. So I think that will involve more outreach, and I encourage you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that is all for public comment. Oh, wait, we have one more, actually. You may begin when you're ready.
Yes, this is Lucinda Young. I think this is a great program, and I would support recommending to council that we increase the funds. My recollection is that about a third of our city's emissions is from buildings, with a significant portion of that coming from heating. And I've been very concerned about how we can address that problem, how we can encourage and facilitate homeowners in reducing the emissions. And I think this is, a classic. I think this is really a great way to try to do it. We're using a carrot, not a stick. I am disappointed that we're not seeing this used by more low and moderate income homeowners, though I'm not surprised because it is, when you look at the comparison, even with the current rebates, it continues to be significantly more expensive. And for low and moderate income homeowners, even if they are very concerned about climate change and really wanting to do their part, they may just not have the money to do it. So I'm not sure how to encourage low and moderate income participation. As Nick Peterson recommended earlier, perhaps it's increasing the amount available to them even beyond what's being recommended here. Maybe it's more outreach, but I would like to see that focused, because it does appear that a significant portion of people that are using these funds would have done it anyway, so that we're not getting that much more of a net benefit. And we really want these DD funds to encourage people who otherwise would not have put the pumps in. And that's it. Anyway, I would encourage, perhaps there's some tweaks that are necessary here, but overall, I'm strongly supportive of using or asking council to supplement this program with some additional DD funds. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I believe that is all for now.
All right, we can move to discussion for this item.
Michelle, listening to them, is it fair to figure that program would get more bang for the buck if we cut the rebate for high-income people and increase the rebate for middle and low-income people even more than you have here?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question to answer. Yeah, I've thought about this. I don't have any sort of clear answer on it. There's always going to be some people that get the rebate and say, this is great. I was going to get a heat pump anyways, but now I get an extra $1,000. And there are always going to be some people that are higher income that wouldn't fall into one of those camps and really were on the fence, and the rebate did make a difference. Even though it's not a huge amount of money, it was enough to put them over the edge. If we put that amount down, it's already fairly low, maybe that really makes it kind of useless for anyone that's not moderate or low income. Maybe not. We're getting to a point where they're getting fairly common, but they're not, just all over the place at this point. So, we're still sort of in the early adopter phase, but not entirely. So there's I think some shifts in the market happening right now. And then, yeah, if you're raising the moderate and low income to a really high amount, then the amount of actual rebates you can offer goes down for, the amount you're spending. So yeah, there's kind of all these things to balance. I don't think there's a right answer. It comes down to a policy question at the end of the day, and that's what you all are here for. And I don't have enough data to be able to say clearly, everybody who's high income is they're gonna get it or they're not, doesn't matter. I don't know that. And I don't know what amount it would take for low and moderate people, low to moderate households to bite and say, yes, we're gonna do it. Does it have to be the same cost? Do we have to get all the way up there, or does it have to be 50% of the incremental cost? I don't know. So it's a little bit of trial and error. So yeah, unfortunately, I think it's just kind of, we make the best decision that we can and see what happens. Sorry, that's not that helpful.
But it sounds like you've really thought carefully about this, and this is your best judgment in a really uncertain situation. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've thought about it a lot. You know, if the council decided we want to really focus on moderate and low income and really put a lot more money there, I wouldn't think like, oh, that's a bad decision. Like I said, it's more of a policy choice, but, you know, I do think based on those responses we've gotten on the would you have installed a heat pump, we are still getting a decent number of people that are on the fence and making a difference for them. So I think it is having an impact. I think there's a danger that if we stop focusing on those people, you know, we're going to lose some folks and we might not make it up with the low and moderate income households. You know, it might be that we're not offering them enough, we're not able to offer them enough. You know, there's limits with what we can do as a city program. But I think there's a fair enough argument to be made that we really need to be using these funds for low and moderate income households, and the upper income people, they need to get there on their own. Like that's a fair argument to make. But yeah, I just kind of leaned on that first argument side for my recommendation.
Does the city have a way of identifying and targeting low-income homeowners? Like, or are you just putting out general messaging about the?
Yeah, we don't have a great way. We don't have the data. You know, there's more I think we could do. I think, you know, trying to like do more messaging at the senior center, for example. That's where we have a lot of fixed income folks. Like, there is a little bit more we could do to try and target, but you know, it's tricky for sure.
I want to appreciate the analysis that you provided here. I definitely, there's a lot of scribbled numbers.
You should see my desk.
Yeah, I bet, exactly. That's just coming from looking at the analysis that you gave us. So among the scribbled numbers is the figure that if we were to incentivize it to the point where it was a cost-neutral decision for a low-income family, then what you're actually looking at is an increase to $6,000 is what we could do. The current recommendation is to increase to $4,000, right, for low income?
For low income, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just putting it out there that I would like to see $6,000. I would like to see it be cost neutral decision, so it's an easy decision to make. But I do realize that that would impact the number of funds available for all the other income brackets. So, but I am also curious about the 55,000 figure. That looked like a really good estimation based on the run rate so far. If we were to increase the incentive for low-income homeowners, and we were to guess that would cause more people to enroll, could we also lift the ceiling on that 55 to, say, 70,000 or something like that? Are we hitting a particular?
Yeah, the 55,000, it's a recommendation kind of based on the amounts that I recommended and the date we're looking to go to, but that's not set in stone at all. Obviously, the more you ask for, you know, the harder it is to get that out of the budget from council. But that's not, you know, there's no particular reason why it's that number. It could be something else.
And I guess one more thing about the question of what to do with the program after the HERA comes in next year. It sounds like the HERA would be covering the full incremental cost, so making it a sort of an easy choice to make. But the decision to upgrade your heating system at all is still going to cost you $8,000, which means if you're truly low income, you're probably not going to do it until it breaks. And most of the houses I've lived in have very old heating systems, so they take many decades to break. So there may be a place for this program ongoing to incentivize people to upgrade, even though their heating's not broken. Thanks.
Let me add to that. A blog post recently by one of the professors at the UC Energy Institute commented that if the furnace breaks in the winter, upgrading the electric panel and getting a heat pump installed takes so long. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll note we've been thinking about the sort of pre-planning issue of this, so that's another thing I've been working on and hoping to bring some thoughts on soon. But yeah, definitely an issue.
I like that idea of increasing the incentive for low-income customer. I think it might be an easier sell as not a, or as a time-bound incentive, because we have a limited amount of funds available. So I do like the idea of it, and having HERA kick in provides a nice time binding for it. Although I hear what you're saying. I mean, if we had all the money, I think that would be great. But knowing that we have a limited pot, I feel like I would make an argument in favor of increasing the incentive and having the time bounds be implementation of HERA. That would basically replace this program, and we can say we want to. I mean, it also creates more alignment between the level of incentive now and through 2024, because if we have this lower level incentive now, we know HERA is coming. It seems a little weird to encourage adoption now when incentives are lower than they will be in mid-2024. There's a lot of sort of like, well, why would I install now if I can wait a little while? And if we get our incentives to be more at parity, I think it's just a more consistent message to the consumer that like, hey, this is at price parity or thereabouts or whatever with natural gas. It creates consistency in that marketing message.
I had one question. I saw that this was just for the ducted heat pump. Can you talk a little bit more about the decision not to raise it for the ductless?
Yeah, great question. So for the ductless heat pumps, we found that the average cost is actually on par or maybe even a little lower than a gas furnace. Looks like the average is something like $6,000 or $7,000. We don't have a ton of data, but I was actually surprised by how low the costs were in the permits that we've seen. So that's why I left it out of this. I thought maybe it wasn't as much of an issue. Also, we see a very small number of ductless heat pumps coming in. I think they made up like 7 of all the rebates we've had or something, so not a huge amount. They're pretty uncommon in Albany.
Is that because most people have ducts already? They have ductwork in their house?
Yeah, most people are replacing ducted furnaces for ducted heat pumps.
This is an informational question for everyone, I guess, but maybe you know, what does this look like for multi-family dwellings? What sort of systems would or have we considered offering an incentive for multi-family dwellings to upgrade their heating systems? Like, I don't even actually really know what the system is.
So this program doesn't distinguish this, any type of unit is eligible. So single family, multifamily, even non-residential theoretically. We haven't had any multifamily applications. It's not something we've really pushed a lot because it's not really designed for multifamily buildings, to be honest. There is a BayREN multifamily specific rebate program, and there's a few other things as well. But to be honest with you, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently and am probably gonna bring a whole separate item on soon, because I think that's a really important question. There kind of has to be specific thought about it. So it's sort of technically part of this program, but not really a focus of this program. And theoretically, you guys could decide that we don't care about this program at all, and we only want to focus on multifamily, that's fine too, but, yeah.
Thank you.
So are we at recommendation time? I mean, is that sort of like,
Yeah, I think if we have agreement among the committee, I think it might be worth, if there's general agreement about changing the amounts, it might be worth kind of talking through the numbers a little bit more specifically, especially when it gets to like the overall funding recommendation and stuff. So maybe it's worth delving into that a little bit before we get into recommendation. I heard some thoughts about, so I think it was changing the low income amount from 3,000 to 9,000, or maybe 3,000 to 6,000. I wasn't 100% sure on that, so maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, it had suggested, well, 6,000 is the figure that would make it a cost neutral, incremental cost neutral.
An additional 6,000, or
6,000 in total for the Albany provided incentive. And we
Because you
could, I
could-
mean, to make it a real.
in addition with the other incentives.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to show that slide again?
Yeah, let me, okay, yeah, see, that's where I was getting confused about whether we were talking about all of it or not. Okay, so this is our incremental costs, and then, yeah, so there's effectively $3,000 available from other programs. So a $6,000 Albany rebate would pretty much even out the costs there. That's what we're talking about. And that would be for low income.
Would we want to do something for the middle income?
What is AMI?
Great question. Yeah, maybe I should have covered that. So area median income, or AMI, is it's the way that the housing department basically categorizes different income groups. So basically our sort of like East Bay area is, they calculate all the incomes that they get from the census and figure out the median income for this region. And then each household is compared to that median. So a moderate income household is between 80% and 120% of the area median income. So, kind of on either side of that median. Whereas a low income household is below 80% of the area median income. And those numbers, there's like a whole chart of what those numbers are based on the household size as well. So, 3 versus 4, and there's like a whole list of numbers that we have on our website.
That I was actually asking. I'm aware of the concept of what it is, but I wanted to know what the actual numbers of it
I can,
were.
yeah, let me
Just to guesstimate sort of like monthly cost of living here, and like, is it realistic for moderate income household to do this? Thank you.
Yeah, so
Oh, great.
these are the limits right now. Oops. Everybody should join the e-news. Yeah, so this first row here is low income based on the household size, and then here's the moderate income.
And so when that says moderate income limit, that's the upper limit for moderate
That's right,
income.
yeah. So for a one-person household, you have to be underneath that 119,950.
I don't know. As a householder with a family of 4, it's kind of like right on the fence for my own decision making, whether if I were moderate income, whether I would make this decision or not. It seems financially conceivable to do it. What other senses do people have who do their household budgets?
where is it, can you remind me where the incentive is currently? Now we have.
For moderate?
We have low and moderate separately, or is it just low and?
They're separate. Currently, For moderate, for a ducted heat pump, it's currently $2,000.
Okay, got it. So it is very stepwise. And your recommendation was to make that 3, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Correct. That's correct.
I don't really feel strongly about it. That seems okay to me, to raise it by 1,000 and maybe focus the additional spending on low income. But I feel strongly
Yeah.
about it.
Same, I don't have strong feelings about the moderate income one.
So I guess the edit would be on low income.
And then I would also like to hear what you guys would think about raising the total spend a little bit with the hope that more people would use it. Well, so 55 was the estimate if the rate continues and just increases by a few households, so maybe twice a few, maybe increase it up to 70,000, 75. Whatever shape of number seems like it's most likely to pass approval. 72.
Yeah, so you can imagine, so basically, the concept here is, in addition to my estimate for what we need, we'll be adding $2,000 extra for each low-income household. In this last period, we had 2 low-income households use the rebate. So imagining that this is, it's a good chunk of money increasing, so you could imagine maybe at the high end, we get 8 low-income households. That's $16,000. You could say 15,000 or 20,000. So, yeah, so somewhere between $70,000 and $75,000 is, I think, where we would end up with that.
I'd vote for 75, just in case we do well, and if we don't, then we have the money still in the fund.
Okay.
Still stuff left over, how would that process work? Like, where would the additional money go?
Stays in the general fund, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it could, at any point, we could look at the program and say, okay, we want to end the program now and we don't use that extra money, or we change the program and use it differently, or just let it run out if we wanted. So we'd kind of revisit that as we get closer to the heat relaunch and everything.
Then in terms of time limiting it, like Dan was suggesting, would we attach a date to that, or would we tie it to whenever the HERA funding appears?
Yeah, I think that's also a question. Theoretically, you could recommend kind of putting a pause into the program as soon as HERA launches, or stopping the program at that point. Or we could kind of leave it open and just sort of do that on a, kind of ad hoc as it comes up, either way.
Would this be a good time to do a motion with the edits? Or okay, then I'll make the motion, yeah.
All right, can you, list it out just so we all know what we're voting on?
Recommend that the council appropriate in addition $75,000 in funding for the program, and increase the moderate and low income rebates to $3,000 and $6,000 respectively. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. Member Fasoon?
Yes.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you guys very much. And I'll just note that it's 8:50 right now. We're getting close to being done with our agenda, but we do still have subcommittee updates and future agenda items, and also a short chat about our next meeting scheduling, in case we want to extend.
Are there any motions?
I guess I always do this, but I'll vote to extend 9:15. I think it'll take us that long.
I'll second the.
Okay, Member Sassoon?
Yep.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, then, oh, go ahead.
I don't know if this is legal, but could we, in the interest of time, skip the subcommittee updates? Because I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time on the future agenda items and the fact that the next meeting is so close to Christmas.
I mean,
Maybe that's not legal, I don't know.
if everyone wanted to skip it, we could. Yeah. Or agree to run through it quickly, either way.
All right, then I guess we can move on to the next item.
That's not the next item. It's subcommittee updates, but that's okay. You guys can go ahead.
We don't have
There we go.
any updates, or you have one?
Yeah, I mean, since we kind of just took the advice to use like the general support, things kind of out of the committee have been going really well. We're starting our outreach to teachers, and the student group at UC Berkeley is really excited to pilot this, and I've been teaching in San Leandro with 5th and 4th grade students, teaching environmental stuff, so kind of piloting that in San Leandro, and it's been going really well, and the kids have been really enjoying it. We just finished up that session in San Leandro, so we're excited to now bring that to Albany, now that we've actually gotten to teach classes on the same topics and had teacher feedback from other districts, so things are going well on the student outreach on that front outside of the committee.
And I don't think we have any updates for environmental justice.
Not right now.
Any other updates? Then, I guess we can move on to the next item.
We can open it up to public comment.
Public comment, yeah.
All right, the first public comment may begin.
In the interest of time, hi, Nick Peterson. In the interest of time, I was suggesting we just get all the presentations because I think they're all going to be pretty short, and then comments could be made afterwards. But my comments for the student outreach is just say congratulations. I did have some other things jotted down that, I went and looked at the clubs at the school, and reps from the Climate Action Committee could partner with AHS Spider, which is something, I forget what that stands for, Protective Initiative of the Defense of Environmental Resources Club, which I think is the primary one. There's also an AHS Climate Justice Club. So I think there's some very interested students there that could get involved in what you're doing. Anyway, I'll have other comments on. I guess we talked about environmental justice, so I'll talk about this in future topics, but I think getting a more detailed demographics understanding of Albany, especially where naturally occurring affordable housing units are located, because those are the people we need to reach out to, and having that data would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is all for public comment.
All right, we can move on to discussion. Are there any comments?
discussion of subcommittee updates. I have a request, if possible, to work on the home electrification subcommittee, and also to encourage maybe even more people, because is there one person? Yeah, because that's one of the sort of the three things we're working on in the coming year. So ideally, maybe not just myself, but maybe one other person could join and make that more robust so we can fabricate some proposals.
I could join. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm already interning for an organization, and we're working on electrification, so this would be like educating. Yeah.
Great.
All right. If there are no other comments, I guess we can move on to the next item. Are there any requests for future agenda items?
I feel like there were two that were brought up a number of times tonight that are worth considering. One is whether or not to declare a climate emergency. And the other is setting 2024 priorities for this group for subcommittees or whatever.
Yeah, I'd agree with both. Yeah, we've heard from the public a number of times around the wanting to talk about a climate emergency, and I think all of us on this committee feel like we are part of that emergency. I'm feeling called to be here, so yeah, I'd like to, put that agenda item to vote if we should vote to recommend the city council to declare a climate emergency, and I'd be happy to help do research ahead of that time to coalesce some of the statements that have been made and how we could best make that statement most effective to city council. And yes, the strategy session on what to prioritize for 2024 sounds great too.
I guess I'm thirding that. I too want those two things on the agenda. And I know we don't assign time limits to things, but I would, I guess, love to see not too many other things on the agenda, so we have plenty of time for those things.
Regarding the climate emergency, I think if we had examples where the city did not prioritize climate sufficiently, it would help us make a stronger proposal to the city council. One that was mentioned was the police purchase of hybrids rather than electric vehicles. And Michelle and I separately had long chats with the lieutenant in the Albany police force who was in charge of that decision. And I came away with a sense that there was a real focus on trying to get an EV that would fit the police department's needs for a patrol car. One other thing that came out of that is the notion that maybe it would help to put in dedicated EV chargers at the police station, because that was one of the two factors, the other being the unavailability of appropriate models, but appropriate models of EVs might well be available the next time they buy some police cars, because they roll over every few years instead of all at once. But again, just the basic, if people, public commenters, whatever, can point to examples, that would be real helpful of where city staff did not give sufficient weight to climate.
I'm also interested in talking more about the foodware ordinance, but I know that we're getting into the holidays and, there might not be enough time to move that item forward before the next meeting. And also I want to respect the request for not having too much on the next agenda, but I am interested in sort of moving that forward. I know it'll take a couple of meetings, so.
Are there any other requests?
I'll just take a moment here as we're talking about the future. So our next meeting is currently scheduled for December 20th. There aren't any other dates available on the city calendar that we could move that to, unfortunately. December is usually pretty packed with people rescheduling meetings. So I did want to just spend a minute here to check in and see if anyone knows that they will not be available for that meeting. Since, you know, there's always a risk in late December that we won't have a quorum and we might need to just cancel beforehand. So curious if anyone knows they won't be available or is just kind of not interested in meeting that late in December, which is totally understandable. Or maybe not sure and it's kind of an iffy thing. So just curious if we could get kind of a pulse check on that.
Well, I can probably attend via Zoom, but I'll be traveling, and I think that means that I won't be able to vote.
Yeah,
If I
so
understand the rules.
the rules regarding Zoom currently are that you can attend via Zoom if you have a contagious illness or if you have to be away because you're attending another like local public meeting. So in most cases, you can't attend via Zoom, basically, and you're not really supposed to be able to plan it in advance. You can attend as a member of the public, but it wouldn't count for quorum, and you wouldn't be able to vote.
Did you hear from Eric about his availability? Since he's not here.
Trying to remember. I think he won't be available, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. Everybody else is around? Okay.
All
Or at
not
least they
going
think so.
anywhere fun.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, please keep me updated if that does change. And for now, we'll plan on having the meeting on that date then, unless something else happens, and I'll let you know otherwise. But we are still on item 7, future agenda items, so I'll put it back to the committee for anything else before we go to public comment.
If there are no other requests, I think we can move on to public comment.
We have one public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nick Peterson speaking again. You know, I wasn't clear that in 6.3 we were I didn't hear anything from Zero Emissions or from Home Electrification Subcommittee mandates and committees. So I'll address those in the future items. So I think future items, it's important to still pursue the level 2 public charge stations. There's a lot of innovative stuff going on. I think, you know, there should be at least under the zero emissions transportation, they should start, looking into that more closely because we do have these DD funds that exceeded, what we even can put together recently. And so I think that would be a really good idea to move that along. Of course, declare the climate emergency. I think that's important. It's not, I think we should do it. Number one strategic plan goal is addressing this, not as a climate emergency, but climate change, and that everything the city does is taken in consideration of that. The electrification mandate subcommittee, I sent CAC members info on a webinar by the Sierra Club Environmental Committee and about Berkeley's BASO, which was the Berkeley Emission Saving Ordinance, which is going to be transitioning more into a electrification aspect, and that's also being studied by BayREN and Stop Waste as the basis for a more statewide, potentially statewide requirement on existing home performance. So I hope you attend that and get some information on that and continue to pursue some kind of start of a mandate. I think this electrification mandate is going to become a really big deal as, you know, normal heat pumps come into play and EVs are more there. It's the buildings sitting there not doing stuff. So I think that's very important. I also think you should discuss for adaptation, establishing a citizen tree brigade, similar to the now defunct street tree committee that used to advise on street trees and had members, but this would be more of an active, it wouldn't be a normal committee under the Brown Act. It would just be triggering something off to have like an Albany tree group that would partner with the city and determine priority locations for planting shade trees where needed and get them in the ground now. These things are going to take 8 years before they're even doing any impact. So we need to get them now. And then the incentives, I'd see the heat pump incentive program becoming more like a study of incentive programs phase 2. So there are going to be other incentives coming up. And, you know, how do you handle it with, especially with the, getting it to the people that need it the most? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe we have one more public comment. May I begin when you're ready?
This is Lucinda.
Oops.
Sorry about that. May I begin now?
Yes, can you hear me now? This is Lucinda Young, and I have a few suggestions for future agenda items. Just as a follow-up to the presentation on the proposed or exploring a foodware ordinance, I would like us to follow through and have a future agenda item for an adoption of a recommendation of a foodware ordinance. Also, I think there's been a lot of discussion here, and I don't need to really do any more, except I think a number of council members and members of the public want a declaration of a climate emergency. Also, there has been a lot of discussion for at least the last year, I think even longer, about establishing EV charging stations, level 2 charging stations. And I think we need to really get some resolution on that. There's just been a lot of discussion, but really not much headway made on that. And lastly, I see a real need for public outreach on recycling and composting. I see so many people in Albany who are confused about the rules. And I believe there was a program, a public education program in maybe August, which I didn't even, it was after the fact that I noticed it on the calendar, and I didn't receive any notification about it or see any any public announcements about it. And there was an excellent program about, I think it was in 2021 that the city put on. But I see just a massive amount of confusion in with my neighbors' waste management, insisting that plastic bags go in the recycling, that compostable plastic goes in the green bin. So I do see some need for that. I don't know if that's going to involve any kind of recommendation to council, but perhaps some outreach by staff, or perhaps another workshop or something. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is all for public comment.
All right. Let's go ahead and adjourn. Our next meeting will be December 20th. Thank you.